The sound of angry whispers followed Lillian Westfield like a shadow as she made her way down the dusty main street of Copper Creek, Montana Territory, 1873. She kept her gaze forward, spine straight as a fence post, though each venomous word stung like a scorpion's tail. It hadn't always been this way. Once, she'd been the cherished daughter of the town's most respected doctor. But that was before the incident at Whitewater Gulch, before the stagecoach robbery that had left her the sole survivor, trapped for 3 days with the notorious Blackwater gang before the cavalry arrived. Lillian pushed open the door to her father's medical office, the little bell jingling cheerfully in stark contrast to the heaviness in her heart. "There she is," Mrs. Peabody whispered not so quietly to Mrs. Thornton as they gathered their belongings. "Poor doctor. Westfield having to bear such shame. 3 days with those outlaws," Mrs. Thornton replied with a dramatic shudder. "No proper lady would have survived with her virtue intact." Lillian's cheeks burned, but she kept her expression neutral as she moved behind the reception desk. 6 months had passed since her rescue, and still the whispers followed her everywhere. "Ladies," Dr. Westfield said firmly as he emerged from the examination room, "I believe we're finished here. Lillian, would you prepare Mrs. Wilson's tonic?" The women shuffled out, casting backward glances at Lillian. Her father sighed heavily, the lines around his eyes deeper than they'd been a year ago. "Don't pay them any mind, Lily," he said gently. "Small minds deal in small gossip." "I know, father," she managed a weak smile. "I just wish they'd find something new to whisper about." Across town at the Triple W Ranch, Forrest Whitaker pulled off his leather gloves and wiped the sweat from his brow. At 28, he'd built a reputation as one of the most successful cattle ranchers in the territory. His herd was growing, his land expanding, and his dreams of establishing something permanent in this wild country were slowly taking shape. "Boss," called out Jimmy, his young ranch hand. "Riders coming." Forrest squinted against the afternoon sun, making out 3 riders approaching from the direction of town. He recognized Joseph Miller, the town banker, and 2 of his associates. "Mr. Whitaker," Miller greeted as he dismounted. "Fine day for ranch work." "Every day's a fine day for ranch work if you ask me," Forrest replied, shaking the man's hand. "What brings you gentlemen out this way?" "Business proposition," Miller said, removing his hat. "Mind if we talk inside?" In Forrest's modest but comfortable ranch house, Miller laid out his proposal. The railroad was coming through, and with it, opportunity for growth. The town council was planning a social to welcome railroad investors, and they wanted the Triple W to provide the beef. "It'll be the biggest event Copper Creek has seen," Miller explained. "Everyone who's anyone will be there." "Sounds like good business," Forrest agreed. "There's something else," Miller said, shifting uncomfortably. "The council would be honored if you'd consider escorting Elizabeth Chambers to the social. Her father's a major investor in the railroad, and I appreciate the thought," Forrest interrupted, "but I don't need matchmaking services." Miller chuckled nervously. "Of course not. Just thought you might enjoy the company of a proper lady for the evening, someone respectable." Forrest's eyes narrowed slightly. "As opposed to someone not respectable," Miller cleared his throat. "Well, in a growing town like ours, it's important to maintain certain standards. The social sets the tone for our community's future." After the men departed, Forrest stood on his porch, watching the dust trail their horses kicked up. Something about Miller's tone had rankled him. He'd built his ranch from nothing after arriving in Montana 5 years ago with little more than a dream, and the skills he'd learned working cattle drives from Texas. He didn't care much for the town's social politics. The next morning found Lillian at the general store, shopping for medical supplies. She was examining a bottle of laudanum when the shopkeeper's wife, Martha Green, approached. "We just received these gloves from back east," Martha said, displaying a pair of fine ladies' gloves. "Though I suppose you wouldn't have much use for them at social events anymore." Lillian placed the laudanum in her basket. "I'll take 3 bottles, please." "Such a shame," Martha continued as if Lillian hadn't spoken. "You were once the belle of Copper Creek, now look at you." "Mrs. Green," Lillian said quietly. My father needs these supplies. Of course, dear. Martha's smile didn't reach her eyes. That'll be $2.40. As Lillian counted out the money, the door opened and several cowboys entered, trail dust still clinging to their clothes. Among them was Forrest Whitaker, his tall frame filling the doorway. Morning, Mrs. Green, Forrest said, tipping his hat. His eyes briefly met Lillian's before she looked away. Mr. Whitaker, what a pleasure, Martha cooed, her entire demeanor changing. What can I help you with today? Need supplies for the ranch. Got that order I sent Jimmy in for yesterday? While Martha bustled to gather Forrest's supplies, Lillian collected her purchases and turned to leave. As she passed Forrest, she nodded politely. Miss Westfield, he said, tipping his hat again. She paused, surprised that he knew her name. Mr. Whitaker. Careful now, one of the cowboys muttered to Forrest. That one's damaged goods. Lillian's face flushed and she hurried outside, fighting back tears. She was so focused on escaping that she didn't hear the sharp rebuke Forrest delivered to his companion. That evening, Dr. Westfield announced at dinner that he'd been invited to attend the railroad social as the town's physician. I've declined, he said, cutting into his steak. I won't attend any function where my daughter isn't welcome. Father, please, Lillian protested. You must go. The town needs you to be there. The town needs to remember its Christian charity, he replied firmly. I'm quite content to stay home, she insisted. Really? 2 days later, Lillian was arranging medical supplies when a commotion outside drew her attention. A ranch hand was helping a bloodied man off a horse. Dr. Westfield, the hand shouted. Got a man hurt bad here. Lillian rushed to help as her father emerged from his office. The injured man was Forrest Whitaker, his shirt soaked with blood from a gash on his shoulder. Steer caught me with its horn, Forrest explained through gritted teeth. Tore clean through. Bring him inside, Dr. Westfield instructed. Lillian, prepare the examination room. Working quickly, Lillian readied the instruments while her father helped Forrest onto the table. The wound was deep, requiring immediate attention. I'll need to clean and stitch this, Dr. Westfield said. Lillian, the laudanum. No laudanum, Forrest insisted. Just do what needs doing. It will be painful, Mr. Whitaker. I've had worse. For the next hour, Lillian assisted her father as he cleaned and stitched the wound. Forrest remained stoic, only occasionally tensing when the needle pierced particularly sensitive flesh. Lillian couldn't help but admire his fortitude. You should rest here for a while, Dr. Westfield said when he'd finished. That wound needs time before you start jostling around on a horse. I've got a ranch to run, Forrest objected, and you'll run it better with 2 good arms, the doctor countered. Rest for an hour at least. Lillian will check on you. After her father left to attend another patient, Lillian brought Forrest a cup of water. Thank you, he said, managing to sit up with only a slight wince. You're quite brave, she remarked. Most men would have taken the laudanum. Never cared for the foggy feeling. He studied her face. You're brave too, from what I hear. Lillian stiffened. I don't know what tales you've heard, Mr. Whitaker. I heard you kept a young girl alive during that stagecoach robbery, he interrupted. Tended her wounds even while those outlaws held you captive. Lillian's lips parted in surprise. No one ever mentioned that part of the story, Sarah Atkins, she said softly. She was traveling to her aunt's. She would have died without care. Takes courage to tend the injured with guns pointed at you. I did what anyone would do. Forrest shook his head. No, Miss Westfield, you did what few would have the strength to do. When Forrest left the doctor's office that afternoon, something had shifted. For the first time since the incident, someone had seen her actions during those terrible days as something other than suspicious. The next week brought Forrest back to the doctor's office for a check on his stitches. Dr. Westfield was out on a house call, leaving Lillian to examine the wound. It's healing well, she noted, her fingers gently probing the area around the stitches. No sign of infection. Your father taught you medicine, Forrest asked. Since I was a girl, Mother died when I was young, and Father thought medical knowledge would serve me better than needlepoint. Smart man. He is, she agreed, applying a fresh bandage. Though the town thinks he should have sent me away after what happened, Forrest's expression darkened. The town has a habit of judging what it doesn't understand. And what do you understand, Mr. Whitaker? The question slipped out before she could stop it. I understand that courage isn't always recognized, especially in women. His blue eyes held hers. And I understand that people fear what makes them confront their own weaknesses. When he left, Lillian found herself thinking about his words long into the evening. That night, she wrote in her journal for the first time since her captivity. The railroad social was fast approaching, and Copper Creek buzzed with preparation. Lillian watched from the sidelines as decorations went up in the town hall and women discussed their gowns. Part of her ached to be included, to return to the life she'd known before. Another part had grown accustomed to invisibility. One afternoon, while her father was napping, a knock came at the door of their small house behind the medical office. Lillian opened it to find Forrest Whitaker standing there, hat in hand. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, surprised, "is your shoulder troubling you?" "No, it's healing fine." "I came to ask you something." He looked uncharacteristically nervous. "Would you accompany me to the railroad social?" Lillian stared at him. "That's not a very funny joke, Mr. Whitaker." "It's not a joke, Miss Westfield. I'd be honored if you'd attend with me." "You can't be serious." The entire town would be scandalized. "Let them be," his jaw set in a determined line. "I don't much care for people who judge others without walking in their boots." "Why would you want to be seen with me?" she asked bluntly. "Because I admire courage." "Because I'm tired of watching this town treat you unjustly, and because I'd like to know you better." Lillian felt a flutter in her chest that she hadn't experienced in a long time. "The town council won't like it. They've probably arranged for you to escort someone more suitable." Forrest smiled. "They tried, I declined. If I say yes, you'll be subjected to the same whispers that follow me. I've weathered worse storms than gossip, Miss Westfield." That evening, Lillian told her father about Forrest's invitation. Dr. Westfield's eyes lit up for the first time in months. "Forrest Whitaker is a good man," he said. "One of the few in this town with both sense and spine." "But father, the scandal will die down eventually," he finished for her. "And in the meantime, you'll have shown this town that you won't be hidden away like something shameful." The night of the social arrived clear and cool. Lillian wore her best dress, a blue gown she'd made herself the previous spring. Her hands trembled as she pinned up her hair, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. When Forrest arrived to escort them, he was dressed in a formal suit that transformed the rugged rancher into a striking gentleman. His eyes widened appreciatively at the sight of Lillian. "You look beautiful, Miss Westfield," he said sincerely. The town hall was decorated with lanterns and bunting, and a small orchestra played in the corner. As they entered, conversation faltered and dozens of eyes turned in their direction. "Ignore them," Forrest whispered, offering his arm. "Stand tall." Mrs. Miller approached first, her smile tight. "Mr. Whitaker, we weren't expecting. That is, we thought you might be escorting Miss Chambers tonight." "Miss Chambers will have to find another dance partner," Forrest replied pleasantly. "I'm here with Miss Westfield." The whispers spread through the room like wildfire. Lillian heard snippets as they moved through the crowd. The nerve of that girl. Poor Mr. Whitaker must not know. Tainted woman. Forrest led her to the dance floor as the orchestra began a waltz. "May I have this dance?" "Everyone's staring," Lillian murmured as he took her in his arms. "Let them. We're giving them the best show in town tonight." As they danced, Forrest proved to be surprisingly graceful for a man who spent his days on horseback. Lillian gradually relaxed, allowing herself to enjoy the music and the steady warmth of his hand at her waist. "Where did you learn to dance?" she asked. "My mother insisted all her sons learn, said we'd thank her someday." His eyes crinkled at the corners. She was right. When the music ended, Joseph Miller approached with several town council members. "Mr. Whitaker, might we have a word in private?" Miller asked, his eyes flicking disapprovingly to Lillian. "Anything you need to say to me can be said in front of Miss Westfield," Forrest replied firmly. Miller cleared his throat. "Very well. We're concerned about the impression being made on our railroad investors. This is a respectable gathering, and what exactly are you implying about Miss Westfield's respectability?" Forrest's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. Now, Mr. Whitaker, we all know the unfortunate circumstances of her situation. Her situation, Forrest's eyebrows rose. You mean when she saved a child's life while being held at gunpoint, that situation? There were 3 days unaccounted for, Miller insisted. 3 days alone with those outlaws. No virtuous woman could have emerged untainted. The word hung in the air like a thundercloud. Lillian felt her chest tighten, the familiar shame washing over her. Mr. Miller, Forrest said, his voice deadly quiet, you're speaking about the woman I intend to court properly with her father's permission. I'd advise you to choose your next words carefully. A hushed silence fell over the nearby dancers. Lillian's heart raced at Forrest's declaration. Court, Miller sputtered. Surely you can't mean, I mean exactly that. Forrest turned to Lillian, taking her hand. Miss Westfield possesses more courage and character than most people in this room combined. She is, in my estimation, the purest treasure in Montana territory. The directness of his words, spoken loudly enough for all to hear, sent a wave of murmurs through the crowd. Dr. Westfield appeared at Lillian's side, his eyes glistening with pride. Well said, Mr. Whitaker, he declared. The evening continued with a strained politeness from the townspeople. Some avoided them entirely, while others, perhaps moved by Forrest's declaration, made tentative overtures of friendship. Through it all, Forrest remained at Lillian's side, his presence a shield against the worst of the judgment. As they walked home under a sky scattered with stars, Lillian finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. Did you mean what you said? About courting me? Forrest stopped walking and turned to face her. I've never been one for saying things I don't mean, Miss Westfield. From the moment I saw you tending that wound without flinching, I knew you were someone special. The rumors won't stop overnight, she warned. I don't expect them to, but they'll find something new to gossip about eventually. He took her hand gently. I'd like your permission and your father's to call on you properly. Why me? She whispered. With all the unmarried women in the territory who jump at the chance to marry a successful rancher because you're the only one I can't stop thinking about. His gaze was steady, honest. The only one brave enough to face down this town's cruelty with her head high. 2 weeks later, Forrest invited Lillian and her father to Sunday dinner at the Triple W Ranch. The house, usually a bachelor's domain, had been thoroughly cleaned, and Forrest had hired Mrs. Rodriguez from town to prepare a special meal. This is quite impressive, Dr. Westfield remarked as they toured the property. You've built something substantial here, Mr. Whitaker. Thank you, sir. Started with 50 head of cattle and a run-down cabin, been adding to it ever since. Lillian walked slightly ahead, admiring the view from the hill where Forrest's house stood. Below stretched rolling grasslands where cattle grazed, and beyond that, mountains rose purple against the sky. It's beautiful, she said when Forrest joined her. Peaceful? It is that. Sometimes when I'm riding the far pastures, I don't see another soul for days. He paused. Some might find it lonely. I think there's a difference between being alone and being lonely, Lillian replied. Sometimes being surrounded by people can be the loneliest feeling of all. Forrest nodded thoughtfully. You understand then. During dinner, Forrest spoke of his plans for the ranch, expanding the herd, building a larger barn, perhaps adding an orchard. Lillian found herself imagining such a life, far from the judgmental eyes of town. Miss Westfield, Forrest said as they enjoyed apple pie on the porch afterward, would you care to walk with me? There's something I'd like to show you. With a nod from her father, Lillian accompanied Forrest along a well-worn path that led to a small rise overlooking a creek. This is my favorite spot on the property, Forrest explained. Especially at sunset, the sinking sun painted the landscape in gold and amber, the creek shimmering like molten metal. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and sun-warmed grass. I can see why, Lillian said softly. It feels like the edge of the world. I come here to think. Forrest turned to face her. Lately, I've been thinking about you, Lillian's pulse quickened. Have you? I've been thinking about how a place isn't really a home until it has the right people in it. He took her hand. Lillian, I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel like I've been waiting for you without realizing it. Forrest. I'm not asking for promises yet, he continued. Just a chance to show you that what others see as tainted, I see as strength. What they whisper about in shame, I honor as courage. Tears welled in Lillian's eyes. For so long, she'd carried the weight of the town's judgment, believing somewhere deep inside that perhaps they were right, that she was somehow diminished by what had happened to her. You've never asked, she said quietly, about those 3 days. It's your story to tell if and when you choose to tell it. What if? What if what they say is true? The question that had haunted her finally emerged. Forrest's eyes held nothing but tenderness. Lillian Westfield, nothing that happened to you during those days could change what I see when I look at you. A woman of extraordinary courage who puts others before herself. A woman who carries scars but refuses to be defined by them. He touched her cheek gently. You are, and always will be, the purest treasure I've ever found. In that moment, with the sun setting behind them and honesty between them, Lillian felt something long frozen within her begin to thaw. For the first time since the stagecoach robbery, she allowed herself to believe in possibilities again. As summer ripened into fall, Forrest courted Lillian with a steadfast devotion that gradually began to change the town's perception. It started with small gestures. Forrest publicly offering Lillian his arm as they walked down the street, bringing her wildflowers when he came to town for supplies, sitting beside her in church each Sunday. Dr. Westfield watched the courtship with approval, noting the gradual return of his daughter's spirit. She laughed more often now, sang while she worked, and held her head high when they walked through town. One crisp October morning, Forrest arrived at the medical office with his hand wrapped in a bloodied cloth. What happened? Lillian asked, immediately ushering him to the examination room. Caught it on a nail while fixing the corral, he explained, watching as she unwrapped the makeshift bandage. Probably could have handled it myself, but I wanted to see you. She smiled, shaking her head as she examined the gash. You didn't need to injure yourself for that. A man does foolish things when he's in love. Lillian's hands stilled. It was the first time he'd spoken the word aloud. Is that what this is? She asked softly, not meeting his eyes. Forrest gently lifted her chin with his uninjured hand. You know it is, Lillian. I've loved you since that day you stood up to Miller at the social, maybe even before that. Even with all the complications I bring, especially with them, they're part of what makes you who you are, he smiled. Besides, I've never been one for easy paths. As she cleaned and bandaged his wound, Lillian realized that somewhere along the way she had fallen in love with him too. Not just for his defense of her, but for the man he was honest, hardworking, and kind in a world that often rewarded the opposite. There, she said, tying off the bandage. Try not to use it too much for a few days. I'll need it on Saturday, he replied, for the harvest dance. Lillian's smile faded slightly. Forrest, I don't think the whole town will be there, he interrupted, including us. The last social didn't exactly go well. Things are different now. You've earned their respect, whether they admit it or not. He squeezed her hand. Besides, I need to show off my dancing skills again. The harvest dance was a tradition in Copper Creek, marking the end of the growing season and the beginning of preparation for winter. The town hall was decorated with autumn leaves, pumpkins, and corn stalks, and tables groaned under the weight of home-cooked dishes. When Forrest arrived to escort Lillian and her father, he brought a gift, a beautiful shawl of soft blue wool. For the chill in the air, he explained as she draped it around her shoulders. It's lovely, she said, touched by his thoughtfulness. The atmosphere at the dance was notably different from the railroad social. While some still regarded Lillian with suspicion, others greeted her warmly. Sarah Atkins, the young girl she had saved during the stagecoach incident, ran up to hug her. Miss Westfield, I've been hoping to see you, Sarah exclaimed. Ma says I can start learning medicine next year just like you. Sarah's mother approached more cautiously but offered a genuine smile. My daughter wouldn't be here if not for your care during that terrible time. We've never properly thanked you. As the evening progressed, more people approached with similar sentiments. It seemed that Forrest's unwavering support had given others permission to acknowledge what they had known all along, that Lillian's actions during her captivity had been heroic rather than suspicious. During a lively reel, Joseph Miller approached Forrest while Lillian was getting punch. "Whitaker," Miller said, extending his hand. "I owe you an apology, and Miss Westfield as well." Forrest accepted the handshake cautiously. "What brought this on? My wife reminded me that judgments made in ignorance are rarely just." Miller looked uncomfortable. "The way you've stood by Miss Westfield, well, it's made some of us reconsider our assumptions." When Lillian returned, Miller offered her a respectful bow. "Miss Westfield, I hope you and Mr. Whitaker will consider joining us for dinner next week. My wife would be honored." The change wasn't universal or immediate, but it was a beginning. As the evening drew to a close, Forrest led Lillian outside to the gazebo behind the town hall, where lanterns cast a golden glow over the wooden structure. "Still think coming was a mistake?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "No," she admitted. "It feels like I'm reclaiming something I thought was lost forever." "Your place in this community was never truly lost, Lillian, just temporarily misplaced." He turned to face her. "There's something I want to ask you." Her heart skipped a beat as he took both her hands in his. "Lillian Westfield, I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your unwavering dedication to helping others." He drew a deep breath. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Joy bubbled up inside her, bright and effervescent. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Forrest Whitaker, I will marry you." He kissed her then, gentle at first, then with a passion that spoke of all the love he'd been holding back. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I promise you, Lillian, no one will ever make you feel less than the treasure you are, not while I draw breath." Their wedding took place the following spring, when wildflowers carpeted the hills around the Triple W Ranch. They chose to marry there rather than in town, with only close friends and family in attendance. Dr. Westfield walked his daughter down an aisle of scattered petals to where Forrest waited beneath an arch twined with early roses. Lillian wore a gown of ivory satin, her mother's locket around her neck and wildflowers in her hair. Forrest, watching her approach, felt his chest tighten with emotion. This extraordinary woman, who had endured so much and emerged stronger, was choosing to share her life with him. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other the strength to overcome, the courage to trust, and the wisdom to recognize true worth." As they exchanged vows, Lillian's voice was clear and confident. The shadows that had once haunted her eyes had receded, replaced by a serene joy. "I, Lillian Westfield, take you, Forrest Whitaker, to be my husband, to stand beside you in joy and in sorrow, in plenty and in want, in sickness and in health. I promise to love you not for how you have defended me, but for who you are, a man of integrity, compassion, and unwavering faith. Where others saw brokenness, you saw strength. Where others whispered judgment, you spoke truth. I give you my heart, complete and whole from this day forward." Forrest's voice was thick with emotion as he responded. "I, Forrest Whitaker, take you, Lillian Westfield, to be my wife, to honor your strength, to cherish your kindness, to walk beside you in all the seasons of our lives. You are the treasure I never expected to find precious, not because you are perfect, but because you are real. Your courage has taught me what true strength looks like. Your forgiveness has shown me what grace means. I promise to love you completely and faithfully for all the days of our lives." As the minister pronounced them husband and wife, a cheer went up from the gathered guests. Forrest kissed his bride with a tenderness that spoke of all the years they would share together. The celebration afterward was filled with music, laughter, and dancing that continued well into the evening. Copper Creek's opinion of Lillian had gradually shifted over the months of her courtship with Forrest, and many who had once shunned her now raised glasses in celebration of her happiness. Late in the evening, as lanterns glowed golden against the deepening blue of twilight, Forrest led Lillian to their special spot overlooking the creek. "Happy, Mrs. Whitaker?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning back against his chest. "I never imagined, after what happened, that I could feel this whole again. You were never broken, Lillian, just tested in ways most people can't comprehend. She turned in his arms, her eyes reflecting the first stars appearing above. Thank you for seeing me, truly seeing me when everyone else looked away. I'll never stop seeing you, he promised, even when we're old and gray, sitting on the porch watching our grandchildren play. Grandchildren. She laughed softly. We should start with children first, don't you think? Forrest's smile warmed his entire face. I can't think of anything I want more than a family with you, Lillian Whitaker. As night fell fully over the Triple W ranch, the newlyweds made their way back to the house that would now be their shared home. The path ahead would hold challenges, as all lives do, but they would face them together, two people who had discovered that true worth isn't defined by the judgments of others, but by the courage to remain authentic in the face of adversity. And in the years that followed, as their family grew and the Triple W ranch prospered, the story of Lillian and Forrest Whitaker became something of a legend in Copper Creek, a reminder that sometimes what others mock as tainted may indeed be the purest treasure of all.